Alright then, today's Torah portion is called Teitze, and it means when you go forth. And it's the 49th out of the 54 individual Torah portions, so we've only got 5 to go until the end of Deuteronomy. We start again in Genesis after this one. It's 5. Last week's Torah portion, Moses was basically defining the system of justice. He was talking about the judges, the law that pertains to the judges. In this week's Torah portion, it comes back to what's their more immediate concern when they go across the Jordan, that they're going across to conquer the land of Canaan, basically. So he gives a load of Torah about conquest, about war, and he just gives a load of Torah about social law, about basically what it is it's showing his heart, how he'd react if he was a human being. So if he was among us, what he would do in certain situations, and a list of significant principles that we're to live by if we're to have a just society, a righteous society, as God would have it. I just want to have a look at Galatians 3:19, because it defines why the law was given in the first place. It says, "Wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of transgressions." Now there's a load of very, very specific laws that are given in this. And Paul tells us in Galatians why they were added. They were added because basically people were doing stuff wrong. Jehovah wouldn't have had to give specific details if people hadn't got it wrong and they were doing specific weird things wrong, and Jehovah has to say, no, you're going to have to do this like that, don't do that. A lot of them seem like common sense, and you think, well, why is he giving that? But Paul tells us in Galatians why. It's because people were getting it wrong. And the whole basis of Torah is basically this idea that Jehovah is giving us perfection in the beginning. So in the beginning he gave us the perfect creation, and things have become twisted and corrupted since then. He gave us certain gifts, and if we were to use the gifts in the way that he meant when he gave it to us, then he wouldn't have had to correct us, he wouldn't have had to give us the Torah. But basically he's given us these gifts and we get it wrong. One of the gifts that he's given us is the breath of life. Every breath that we take is because he's given it to us as a gift. And what we do, he gives us this gift of life. And what we do basically is we often just throw it back in his face. We do things like we drink and we smoke and we take drugs. And I've got to mention Mel because this week she's actually given up smoking. Charlie and I were sat there, we were talking to her about this concept, and right there on the spot she just gave up smoking. And I think that Mel's attitude to this should be an inspiration to everyone. Basically, she was working on the Sabbath, so she can't get out of working on the Sabbath. So she's just decided that what she's going to do is not take any money for working on the Sabbath. The instant that she found out something that was in transgression of God's law, she just cast it aside and doesn't do it. And that's the attitude that we're all to have. But Satan gets in and he tries to take the gifts that God's given us and he gets us to misuse them. So God's given us the breath of life. Satan gets in and says, okay, well, do these things that are unhealthy for you. Basically reject God's gift to you. Another gift that God's given us that Satan tries to get us to misuse is free will. We're given as a gift the ability to make decisions, to choose the path that we're going to go on. Now, we can either use that for God's glory, for what he would decide that we should do, and we can decide to do what he instructs us to, or we can decide that we're not going to do that, and Satan gets in and says, well, God's trying to restrict you in this way, and he convinces us that there's a better way to do things than the way that God would have us to do them. So we can reject that gift as well. God can give us it and say, look, you've got a choice. how you exercise your free will. You either go along with my will, or you do things your own way. Satan gets in, convinces us to do things our own way, go against God. Another gift that he's given us is material possessions that we have. We're all given certain things, we're all given stewardship of material possessions, and we can either use them for God's glory, we can either, he gives us to them, he gives us them, and we can distribute them according to his Torah, we can follow his law, and we can glorify him. People look at us and say, well, they're Christians and they're doing this with their material things, and it glorifies God and how we act. Or we can be greedy and hold it in for ourselves, and then that doesn't glorify God, and people see that behaviour. But we've always got a choice, and these are gifts that God freely gives us, and he says, I'm going to see how you use this gift that I've given to you. Another gift is the gift of intimacy with another person who's your marriage partner. So God gives us this perfect, beautiful gift, and he says, okay, you've got the ability to procreate, you've got the ability to be intimate with this one person. What Satan does is he comes along and he perverts that, and we've got a world that's full of things like pornography, which is a complete twisting of this ideal that God's given to us. We've got images of violence, of humiliation, and it's taking what is beautiful that God has created, that he's given to us as a gift, and it's twisting it, it's corrupting it, and Satan's saying, this is better, it's better for it to be like this, you desire this. Because basically, when we ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we went from choosing what's right and what's wrong, objectively what's right and what's wrong, we started to choose what we desire. So it doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong to us. If we desire it but it's wrong, then we start to go after our desire. If we don't desire it but it's right, then again we start to choose for ourselves right and wrong. We start to have this subjective model. If we just follow what God says, if we just trust what God says, then we will always be led to what is just and what is right and what is pleasing to everyone, to us and the world around us. Now, one of the concepts that's dealt with in this Torah portion is the idea of going to war when we need to go to war. And Jehovah loves peace. His ideal would be for everyone to be at peace with each other. One thing that he's not is a pacifist. He won't run away from war when it's just and right. A just and righteous society won't seek war with other nations, but equally they won't shrink from those wars either. They will fight for a just and righteous cause, and that's exactly Jehovah's heart. If an enemy comes against us and masses arms and masses armies and threatens to attack us, then what we should do as a nation is we should ask him to lead us into battle justly. We shouldn't make an idol of peace. If ideally we want peace, but if we start choosing peace over what Jehovah would have us do, then we've made an idol of it. We've started to put it before Jehovah. So we always follow his Torah, we always see what he says is righteous. Because a just and righteous society won't seek, like, true peace isn't the stopping of all war. True peace is to seek the Creator's will. Because you can have a false peace, false negotiations of peace that lead in the end to more and more conflict. You see it in Israel, with them having peace negotiations with Gaza. There's never going to be peace in that situation, because Hamas want to destroy Israel. They don't want to accept it as a state. So if they make an idol of peace and they choose peace over what Jehovah has instructed them in the Torah to wipe out these enemies from the land, then they're just going to make it worse and worse for Israel. They're just going to put it off. It's going to be a deception, it's going to be a false peace. And Jehovah commands us to be disliked or even hated in the world in order to follow his Torah. This is what Yeshua said in Luke 12:51. He said, "Suppose ye that I am come to give peace on earth. I tell you, nay, but rather division." Because he knew that in a world that's evil, if you come and you start speaking the truth, and you start speaking justice and righteousness, it's not going to go down well with the nations around you. So he knew that when he came and he was speaking the truth, that it was going to cause problems. So he says, I don't come to bring peace. I come to bring truth. I come to bring the division, to bring in the truth. What bring? In Revelation 19:11 it says, "And I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war." Yeshua makes war. It's part of what he does. He judges righteously, and he says these people are evil, and there's nothing that can be done basically apart from to make war with them and to wipe them out. That's what he'll do at his second coming. So in a just society, we're not to seek human ways of doing things basically, not to seek social reform or revolution. What we're to do is to live in society as salt and light and influence that society as person by person, household by household, and gradually make the change. It happens from the inside out. It starts with the individual, change is made there, and then gradually as it goes out, you start with the individual, you change your heart, your soul and your mind, and you cast out the evil that's within the heart, soul and mind, and then you move on to your family unit and you make sure that there's no evil within your family unit. And then once your family is sorted out, then you can move on to your community as a whole. Once your community is sorted out, then you can think about things like an unjust government or people in seats of power that are unjust. But you can't just go to that stage straight away and just deal with the government, have a revolution, get rid of the government, because the thing that replaces it is going to be evil. If it hasn't been dealt with at its root, then the people that are having the revolution are an evil mob of people, so all they're going to replace the government with is evil. And this Torah portion talks a lot about casting the evil out, purging the evil from amongst you. So we'll start reading. It starts in Deuteronomy 21 at verse 10. It says, "When thou goest forth to war against thine enemies, and Jehovah thy God hath delivered them into thine hands, and thou hast taken them captive." Now, the first thing that I'll point out here, the word enemies in Hebrew, it's the plural of the word oyeb, and it's very similar to the word love. They've both got 3 consonants. First is an aleph, and the last is a beit. And the aleph is a picture of Jehovah, a picture of the leader, and the beit is the picture of the household. So you've got the leader and his influence on the household. The thing in the middle, the letter in the middle, is what changes it from love to enemies. And in the word love, the middle letter is a hey, and that in pictograph form represents a window. So when the word is love, then you've got Jehovah and his household and their interaction through an open window, and that is a picture of love. When it's the word enemies, Jehovah and his household, and in the middle is a closed fist. So the concept, the pictograph concept of an enemy is anything that separates Jehovah from his household. The idea that you see in the picture is of them shaking a fist and separating the household, the people of Jehovah from Jehovah, and causing a blockage there. Very, very subtle difference obviously, but it completely changes the word. Verse 11 says, "And seest among the captives a beautiful woman, and hast a desire unto her, that thou wouldest have her to thy wife." So when you go out to fight your enemies, if you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and you'd have her to be your wife, this is what you're to do. Then thou shalt bring her home to thine house, and she shall shave her head and pare her nails, and she shall put the raiment of her captivity from off her, and shall remain in thine house, and bewail her father and her mother a full month. And after that thou shalt go in unto her, and be her husband, and she shall be thy wife. And it shall be, if thou have no delight in her, then thou shalt let her go whither she will. But thou shalt not sell her at all for money. Thou shalt not make merchandise of her, because thou hast humbled her. This is one of the laws that people look at in the Bible, and they say, so you take a female captive and you take her and make her your wife. But that's not actually what it's saying at all. A pagan custom would be, when the men went to war, the women would beautify themselves, so if the men were defeated, when the invading force came in, they put on all their best clothes, and they made themselves look beautiful so that they could seduce the invaders, basically. And what Jehovah is saying is, if you've just fought a war and you go in and there's all these women that have beautified themselves, don't be caught up in your lust. What you need to do is take her to your house. If you want to make her your wife, take her to your house, take off the beautiful clothes that she's put on, put sackcloth and ashes on her, shave her head, which was a pagan custom, and cut her nails back so that she's unappealing. You're to allow her to have her morning ritual of shaving her head and cutting her nails back. You're to honour her rituals. You're to give her a month to mourn, because that's what the Torah says the mourning period should be. So you give her 30 days to mourn. And if after 30 days of her being in your house with a shaved head and cut back nails, crying in sackcloth and ashes, if at that point you still want to make her your wife, then what they would do is you take her to the Beit Din, the house of justice, and they would give her the choice, and they'd say to her, do you want to convert to following the Torah? And do you want to be this guy's wife, basically? And if she agreed to those things, then she would be made his wife. But only if she consented. It wasn't something where she was forced, and she wasn't forced to go back to his house and forced to have her head shaved or anything like that. It would be what she would naturally want to do, because it was her custom to do it. And the last verse there is a really good example of a law that was added because of transgressions. It says, and it shall be, if thou have no delight in her, then thou shalt let her go whither she will. But thou shalt not sell her at all for money. Thou shalt not make merchandise of her, because thou hast humbled her. So this is obviously what people were doing. You'd see the evilness of men's hearts here, that they would, okay, you don't want to be my wife, so I'll sell you, or I'll prostitute you out. And Jehovah's going, no, don't do that. That's not a good thing to do. Let her go freely. If she doesn't want to be your wife, just let her go on her way. But if she does, then honour her. Verse 15 says, if a man have two wives, one beloved and one hated, and they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated, and if the firstborn son be hers that was hated, then it shall be, when he maketh his sons to inherit, that he may not make the son of the beloved firstborn before the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn, but he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he hath, for he is the beginning of his strength, the right of the firstborn is his. What that's saying is, if you've got two wives and you like one of them less than you like the other one, the word hated there is a really, really bad translation. That's not what the concept is in the Hebrew at all. But if the wife that you like less had your firstborn son, don't treat the firstborn son of the wife that you like more as your firstborn. Honour the fact that he's your firstborn. And this is another example of the law that was added because of transgressions. Jacob treated Joseph as his firstborn. Now Reuben was actually his firstborn, and Reuben was the firstborn of Leah. If you remember, he went to live with Laban. He worked for 7 years to have Rachel, and then he was tricked into marrying Leah. and then he had to work another 7 years for Rachel. So this is the law that...
1 and 7 years.
What's that, sorry?
They only have 1 and 7 years.
1. I think he had to work the 7 years for Leah.
No, he
And
wouldn't
then-
have more than one kid. Joseph was right at the end, wasn't he?
I don't think he had to wait another 7 years until he had Rachel. I think that he married one and then he married the other, and he would have had to work off Rachel.
England.
Yeah. Well, basically what Jacob did is he honoured Joseph more. So this law specifically deals with that transgression, and it's thought that this is what caused the brothers' jealousy, because Joseph obviously was given his coat and his brothers were jealous of him and they threw him into the pit, and by rights it should have been Reuben that got the double portion. Even when Jacob blessed Joseph, he blessed his 2 sons and he gave Ephraim the double portion, the double material blessing. It's saying here should go to the firstborn son, the true firstborn, so that should have gone to Reuben. So yeah. Okay, now we've got another controversial law here. Verse 18, if a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father, or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him, will not hearken unto them. Okay, so the word stubbornness here is the Hebrew word saror. It means determined to have one's way, to do one's own will, and to act as one pleases, no matter what anyone else might say. The word translated as rebellious is the Hebrew word murah, which means to act defiantly, to rebel, consequently to disobey. So they don't obey instruction, basically. Now, this is what it says to do to a rebellious child. And people always bring up this law and say, what's always to stone our rebellious children? Well, I'll explain. Verse 19 says, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him, and bring him out unto the elders of his city, and unto the gate of his place. And they shall say unto the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. So, first thing to note here is he's a drunkard. He's not a young child. It's not talking about taking a young child out because they won't do as they're told and stoning them. It's talking about someone as well who's a glutton. Now, in their culture, to be a glutton would mean that you were taking food away from someone else. It's not like the culture that we live in now, where we live with abundance. So if someone's a glutton, then it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect the people around them. This is a really bad person. Verse 21 says, and all the men of his city shall stone him with stones that he die. So shalt thou put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Now, all Israel shall hear and fear. This law was never actually enforced. It was that much of a deterrent that it never got to the state. Parents knew that if they had a child that grew up to be rebellious, that they'd have to take him to the elders of the city and have him stoned. Now, look at the society around us today. It's full of stubborn and rebellious children. Look at the society that they had in Israel then. There were no stubborn and rebellious children because there was this law that was a strong deterrent there. Now, as I say, people love to pick on this law and say, well, surely this is a harsh law, but it shows the wisdom of Jehovah that the society that he created didn't have these stubborn and rebellious children that are causing so much difficulty in the society that we live in today. And as I say, it was never enforced anyway. Now, John 5:30 says, Yeshua speaking, I can of my own self do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek not mine own will, but the will of the Father which hath sent me. Now, this is a really good illustration of how we're to be in following Torah. Yeshua himself was saying, I can't do anything just outside of the will of the Father, because that is what justice is, that is what goodness is. So everything that we do, we're to do according to the will of the Father, because that is the only way that we can do good. We literally cannot do anything that's outside of the will of the Father and for it to still be good and for it to still be just. Now, verse 22 says, "And if a man have committed a sin worthy of death, and he be to be put to death, and thou hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but thou shalt in any wise bury him that day. For he that is hanged is accursed of God, that thy land be not defiled, which Jehovah thy God giveth thee for an inheritance." You probably recognise the language that's used there as language that's used about Yeshua in the New Testament when he was crucified, about him being hanged on a tree, about him being accursed. Now, according to the Talmud, and the Talmud's no good for getting law from, but it is good for getting history from. We can see how they applied these laws. It's a good history text. It's not good for getting extra laws from. It says that the Sanhedrin decided that a man must be hanged with his face towards the spectators upon a wooden stake with his arms slung over a horizontal beam. So to their minds, Roman crucifixion would be fulfilling this, and that would have been the logic that they would have used to justify having Yeshua executed. Now, the exposed body was to be buried before sundown, and they knew obviously that it was the Sabbath the day after, so Yeshua would have to be killed and he'd have to be taken off the cross and he would be buried before sundown. So they knew that having him crucified would fulfill this as well. The reason that it's thought that this person is accursed if they're hung on a tree is that they can't fall to their knees as a final act of repentance before God, so they would be thought to be accursed. In Galatians 3:13 talks about this. It says, "The Messiah hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. It is written, Cursed is every one that hangeth on a tree." It's talking about this very law in the Torah. Now in Acts 5:30, it's the apostles addressing the Sanhedrin, and it's interesting what they say to them. They say, "The God of our fathers raised up Yeshua, whom ye slew and hanged on a tree." Now, the procedure that they followed in order to execute him wasn't just, it wasn't according to the Torah, it wasn't a legal execution. So what they're actually saying to them there, they're accusing them, they're saying, "You killed him and you hung him on a tree," because the apostles knew that it wasn't legal. I mean, one day we'll go into all of the legalities that they broke, basically. One of them there would be him being struck before he was found guilty. That's illegal according to the Torah. It would have been a mistrial. Acts 10:39 they refer to it as well. They say, "And we are witnesses of all things which he did both in the land of the Jews and in Jerusalem, whom they slew and hanged on a tree." Again, it's referring to this. But 1 Peter 2:4 makes an important distinction. It says, "To whom coming as unto us a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God and precious." So he wasn't accursed of God. They didn't follow the Torah in executing him in such a manner. It says that he was disallowed indeed of men. Men found him guilty according to the Torah, but God didn't find him guilty. So he's chosen and precious of God. Deuteronomy 22 verse 1 says, "Thou shalt not see thy brother's ox or his sheep go astray, and hide thyself from them. Thou shalt in any case bring them again unto thy brother. And if thy brother be not nigh unto thee, or if thou know him not, then thou shalt bring it unto thine own house, and it shall be with thee until thy brother seek after it, and thou shalt restore it to him again. In like manner shalt thou do with his ass, and so shalt thou do with his raiment. And with all the lost things of thy brothers, which he hath lost and thou hast found, shalt thou do likewise. Thou mayest not hide thyself. Thou shalt not see thy brother's ass or his ox fall down by the way, and hide thyself from him. Thou shalt surely help him to lift them up again." So basically it's saying, if you see something lost, don't pretend that you've not seen it. take it and return it to your brother, or keep it in your house until you see them again. Basically, the principle that we see here again is Jehovah distributing goods to people. We're not to see something that's lost and say, "No, I'm going to have that." We're to honour the fact that Jehovah's given it to someone else, and we're to say, "Well, we trust Jehovah, so we're going to restore what Jehovah's done. We're going to enforce His will," and it shows our trust in Him, that we don't have to go about taking items that are lost from places. We want things to be as He wants them to be, so we seek to restore them to exactly how He distributed it in the first place. Okay, verse 5 says, "The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment. For all that do so are abomination unto Jehovah thy God." Now, some translations translate this, translate garment there, which is the word kili, and they translate it as garment or clothing, making the focus of the verse what you wear. But the actual word kili, it can include clothing, but it's much broader than that. It means anything tangible, any object, any article, any vessel, any implement, any utensil, any weapon, any garment, any hairstyle, in short, anything basically. So what this is telling us is that men should be men and women should be women. Don't try and take each other's roles. Don't have a woman trying to do a man's thing, and don't have a man trying to do a woman's thing. It's dishonouring Jehovah, it's dishonouring the way that He's created things, the order that He's set in place. Verse 6 says, interesting law, "If a bird's nest chance to be before thee in the way, in any tree or on the ground, whether they be young ones or eggs, and the dam sitting upon a young or upon the eggs, thou shalt not take the dam with a young, but thou shalt in any wise let the dam go, and take the young to thee, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest prolong thy days." Okay, so this is telling us that if you find a nest, take the eggs, but don't take the thing that produces the eggs. Don't take the source of the life, and don't leave the chicks defenseless. Leave it in a position basically where restoration can be made, and we can apply this law, we can apply the principle behind it to many areas of our lives. Like when Paul says about the ox, don't muzzle the ox when you tread it out the grain. It's a completely different situation that he's talking about when he's applying that law in. But what we're to do is we're to look at the principle behind these laws and apply the principle as much as the exact law itself. Verse 8 says, "When thou buildest a new house, then thou shalt make a battlement for thy roof, that thou bring not blood upon thine house, if any man fall from thence." So this is a commandment for making a new house. People will often say, "Well, so what, you're going to put a fence around your roof if you're following the Torah?" But this is talking about building a new house. And people say that it's because they have flat roofs, and because people will be on the roofs, there's more chance of them falling off. So we don't do it today, because they have flat roofs, then there's more chance of people being on the roof. But that's not what the Torah says. It says if you build a new house, put a rail around the roof in case someone falls off your roof and they die. That's exactly how we're to follow it, and not to say, well, I don't think anyone's going to fall off the roof because we've not got flat roofs anymore. It doesn't make any sense. That's sitting in judgment. We heard this law. It's saying that we know best, basically. So if we ever build new houses, let's put railings around the roof. Verse 9 says, "Thou shalt not sow thy vineyard with diverse seeds, lest the fruit of thy seed which thou hast sown and the fruit of thy vineyard be defiled. Thou shalt not plough with an ox and an ass together." Okay, so this is where you get the principle of do not be unevenly yoked with an unbeliever. An ox is much stronger than an ass. An ass is going to hold up the ox, and the ox is going to be slowed down by having an axe yoked to it. So it's saying don't yoke them together. But again, we can look deeper than that. We can look at the spiritual principle behind the law. and we can say, don't yoke things that are uneven together, because one's going to hinder the other one. Verse 11 says, thou shalt not wear a garment of diverse sorts, as of wool and linen together. Now this law, it's pretty badly translated when it says, thou shalt not wear a garment of diverse sorts, as of woolen and linen together. It sounds like it's saying, you shouldn't wear a garment of any diverse sorts, such as wool and linen together. But the word there for a garment of diverse sorts is the word sha'atnes, and it means a cloth that's made by weaving specifically wool and linen together. So that commandment's just telling us, don't wear wool and linen together, which is pretty unlikely that you're going to do anyway, because you wear wool and you want to keep warm, you wear linen and you want to keep cool. Obviously, Jehovah sees something in this. Could be a law that's added because of transgressions, because someone had made a garment of wool and linen together. I don't know why he's added it. What's that, sorry? Not at all. You just wouldn't do it, would you? You wouldn't naturally think, that's what I'm going to do. Verse 12 says, thou shalt make thee tassels upon the four quarters of thy vesture, wherewith thou cover thyself. Okay, so clear commandment here. Jehovah says, make tassels and put them on the four corners of your vesture. Doesn't say, don't wear them if you don't fancy it. It doesn't say, don't wear them if it's going to make you feel a bit awkward socially, or your mates are going to laugh at you. It just says, make tassels on the corners of your vesture. And elsewhere we're told, obviously, to put a cord of blue in them. We just shema, we just trust and obey. We don't put other considerations in front of Jehovah, basically. We just say, well, that's one of his laws, so that's what I'm going to do. Verse 13 says, if any man take a wife and go in unto her and hate her, and give occasions of speech against her, and bring up an evil name upon her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I found her not a maid. Then shall the father of the damsel and her mother take, and bring forth the tokens of the damsel's virginity unto the elders of the city in the gate. And the damsel's father shall say unto the elders, I gave my daughter unto this man to wife, and he hateth her. And lo, he hath given occasions of speech against her, saying, I found not thy daughter a maid, and yet these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the cloth before the elders of the city, and the elders of that city shall take that man and chastise him, and they shall immerse him in 100 shekels of silver, and give them unto the father of the damsel, because he hath brought up an evil name upon the Virgin of Israel. And she shall be his wife. He may not put her away all his days. But if this thing be true, and the tokens of her virginity be not found for the damsel, then they shall bring out the damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her with stones that she die, because she hath wrought folly in Israel, to play the whore in her father's house, so that thou put evil away from among you. Now, bear in mind, the culture that they were living in is completely different from the culture that we live in. If we were to say, well, if a girl's not a virgin when she's married, then she should be stoned, and it wouldn't work in our culture. People would think that's ridiculous. But that was what was expected in their culture. So for someone to not be a virgin when they were married, it would be a really serious issue. They would have had a lot of evilness within them. They would have been going around, they would have been lying, they would have known how serious it was to do this. Now it says if she's falsely accused, then the guy basically has a fine and he has lashes for falsely accusing her. And people would say that there's a disparity between his punishment and her punishment. But the difference is, his punishment is there as a deterrent, so that people didn't just say, oh well, I'm going to accuse her of not being a virgin so I can get out of this marriage. If he thought, well, the evidence is going to be there of her being a virgin, and I'm going to get lashed and fined, then he's not going to do it. So that was the purpose of the punishment for him falsely accusing her. the purpose of the punishment of her not being a virgin was because of the greater evil involved. So there isn't a disparity there at all. It's punishment, weight for weight. And it shows us as well Jehovah's heart, because the Torah shows us what Jehovah's heart is, and it shows his idea of the sacredness of marriage and the sacredness of us being intimate with one person and of him, of this thing that he's given to us. And in our culture today, we're to beware of songs and books and television programs and films that kind of take away from this biblical ideal. We give subtle messages about how men and women are meant to interact with each other, with what is normal and what isn't. But we're not to take our cue from them, we're to take our cue from the Bible. Now, these things are kind of like sexually charged rites of passage, and we accept them as part of culture because we've grown up in a culture where it's just normal to do all of these things. But things like promiscuousness, sex before marriage, and even the idea of dating multiple people and then choosing your partner, all of it is completely unscriptural. All of it's not the way that Jehovah would have it done. He would say, two believers, they feel that they're meant to be together, that Jehovah's brought them together. Then they get married, and then they're in a marriage. And then from that point onwards, they don't get a divorce. Any problems that come up, they just work out the problems. If you're born into a culture where if there's a problem that comes up, the normal accepted thing to do could be to just separate. And that's what's in your head from the beginning. If you're in a culture where there is no divorce, then what's in your head from the beginning is, this is a problem, I better sort out this problem, otherwise this is going to be, this is going to be a nightmare to live in. So it changes completely our psychology, how we think about these situations. In secular society, there's a divorce rate of above 50%, and that is that's just because it's the accepted norm that there's a problem, and then if you can't work it out, then you get a divorce. That's not an option, and people work out their problems. That's what they generally tend to do. Well, the idea of sexuality, Jehovah has created our sexual identity, and the only way that we can find fulfillment, true fulfillment in our sexual identity, is to do things the way that He's designed them from the beginning. He's the creator. He designed us, He created us to be in relationship, one person with another person. We're to be in that marriage. And I think outside of that, we're going to be dissatisfied. We're not going to be fulfilled in our lives. We're not going to fulfill our potential, basically. Okay. Verse 22 says, if a man be found lying with a woman married to an husband, then they shall both of them die, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. So shalt thou put evil away from Israel. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed to her husband, and a man find her in the city and lie with her, then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of the city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die. The damsel, because she cried not, being in the city, and the man, because he had humbled his neighbour's wife. So thou shalt put away the evil from among you. But if a man found a betrothed damsel in the field, and the man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her shall die. And people look at this law and they say, but so if a woman's raped in the city, then it's her fault, basically. But that's not what it says. It says, if he finds her in the field and he forces her, then there's no guilt on her, basically. So it's only in that situation that he's forced her. Notice that when it says in the city, it just says if he lies with her. Now, basically that law is there to prevent them being found in adultery and then her going, oh, I was raped. Well, if you didn't cry out and you were in the city and there were people around that could have stopped the rape, and there's absolutely no evidence that you were raped at all, you're not going to avoid the penalty of being stoned to death just by saying I was raped. But it says if she was in the field and he did force her, and there's no one around for her to cry out to, then there's no guilt on it. It says in verse 26, but unto the damsel thou shalt do nothing. There is in the damsel no sin worthy of death. For as when a man riseth against his neighbour and slayeth him, even so is this matter. For he found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried, and there was none to save her. Okay, this is another example as well of a law that seems harsh to us. But the fact that it seems harsh, oh, they were only committing adultery. No, they should just be let off with that. The fact that we think like that shows the moral decline of society. And this was another law that was there to put people off committing adultery. They thought, well, if we do commit adultery, it might be tempting to do, but if we do it, then we're going to be stoned to death. Well, there's a possibility that we're going to be stoned to death. It'll make you think twice, wouldn't it? Verse 28 says, if a man find a damsel that is a virgin, which is not betrothed, and lay hold on her and lie with her, and they be found, then the man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he hath humbled her. He may not put her away all his days. People look at this law and say, oh, what? So if someone rapes someone, then they've got to then make them their wife. That's a abhorrent law. Surely a just God wouldn't make up a law like that. That's not what it says. It's saying if you sleep with somebody and they're not betrothed to be married and they're a virgin, then honour them and make them your wife. Pay her father the bride price, honour her father, and then make her your wife, because she's going to be in the situation where she hasn't got a husband, she hasn't got a means to provide for herself, and so she will be tempted to say that she is a virgin, marry someone, and then she'll be in the situation of the person that we heard about before, who can be accused of not being a virgin and then end up being stoned to death, but she feels that she's got no choice. So Yehovah is saying, right, okay, to avoid that situation happening, then just marry this woman. You've got to marry her. If you're going to be prepared to sleep with her, then you've got to be prepared to marry her, basically. It's just about honouring and providing for people, not about making a rapist marry his victim. Verse 30 says, a man shall not take his father's wife, nor discover his father's skirt. Bit of a bizarre sounding one, isn't it? Don't discover your father's skirt. If your father's a cross-dresser, you're commanded not to ever find out. It's a bad translation. It says a man shall not take his father's wife, and it talks about because you will uncover your father's nakedness, and that's the term that's used when Canaan uncovered Noah's nakedness. It's the same term. And people kind of put the two together and say, well, Canaan must have slept with Noah's wife. But that's not what it's saying. It's two separate things. It's saying if you sleep with your father's wife, you'll end up uncovering your father's nakedness. It's not saying that uncovering your father's nakedness is sleeping with your father's wife. You understand there's a slight difference there. I spoke to Charlie about this, and Charlie's idea about what it's talking about is it's saying that if you sleep with your father's wife, then you're uncovering his nakedness, because her nakedness is your father's nakedness. It belongs to him. Other way to look at it is that if they're one flesh, if they're married and they're one flesh, if you uncover her nakedness, then you're uncovering his nakedness because they're one flesh. Now, I don't know which way it is. Could be either way. But one thing is clear, that we're not to take our father's wives because it will lead to uncovering our father's nakedness. Pretty simple, really. Should we take a break there? Right, Deuteronomy 23:1 says, he that is wounded in the stones, or hath his privy member cut off, shall not enter into the congregation of Yehovah. A bastard shall not enter into the congregation of Jehovah, even to the 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of Jehovah. Okay. This is quite controversial because people say, well, if the law still applies, then we can't have anyone that's a bastard in church. And we actually had somebody coming along, someone that we used to know, that said, well, if you believe that the law still stands, then I can't come anymore because the law excludes me from coming. But the congregation of Jehovah wasn't the General Assembly. It was a more specific group. The Hebrew word that's used for congregation there is kal, and it's not a general meeting, it's not congregating in the English sense of the word. It's talking about a specific group of people that are called to that meeting by Jehovah. Now, if we read on, let's see, I think to the next verse. In verse 3 it says, an Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of Jehovah, even to their 10th generation shall they not enter into the congregation of Jehovah forever. Now, this tells us, that verse alone tells us that it's not talking about just the General Assembly, because they wouldn't be having children with the daughters of Israel if they weren't in the General Assembly. So there wouldn't be a stipulation that even until the 10th generation they shouldn't enter the congregation of Jehovah. Now, another thing that's worth mentioning as well is the word that's translated as bastard there talks about an illegitimate birth. And an illegitimate birth to them would be someone who was born of temple prostitution, or it was spiritually illegitimate. It wasn't just being a bastard child. That's not what it was talking about. The congregation of Jehovah was it was either the elders or it was a more inside circle than the General Assembly. So what it's saying is, don't have your enemies or people that have come about through spiritual idolatry or through fornication. Don't have them making the decisions for the rest of Israel, basically. But it's certainly not talking about just the General Assembly. Sorry?
That's talking about the child that's just born out of
No, not at all. But it is translated like that because that's probably the closest English word that we've got to it. So when they looked at it, because they didn't understand the cultural context of it, the translators just translated it as bastard. Verse 4 says, because they met you not with bread and with water in the way, talking about the Ammonite and the Moabite, when you came forth out of Egypt, and because they hired against thee Balaam, the son of Beor, of Pithor of Mesopotamia, to curse thee. Nevertheless, Jehovah thy God would not hearken unto Balaam, but Jehovah thy God turned the curse into a blessing unto thee, because Jehovah thy God loved thee. Thou shalt not seek their peace, nor their prosperity, all thy days forever. So, the Ammonites and the Moabites were forgiven by the children of Israel, but they didn't forget what they'd done to them. It's like if a leopard had run wild in your livestock and eaten loads of your livestock. You might forgive the leopard, but you're not going to forget what it's done. The next time it's hungry, you're not going to just give it free rein of your livestock. There's a difference, obviously, between forgiveness and forgetting. To forgive someone, you can say to them, our relationship might not ever be the same. I might not ever see you again, but I don't wish you any ill will. You've got nothing to fear from me. Basically, you can go on about your life without fear of me taking vengeance, and that is forgiving someone. But you don't have to forget the deeds of someone that's trespassed against you. Verse 7 says, thou shalt not abhor an Edomite, for he is thy brother. Thou shalt not abhor an Egyptian, because thou wast a stranger in this land. The children that are begotten of them shall enter into the congregation of Jehovah in their third generation. So we can see that an Edomite or an Egyptian that's marrying into the daughters of Israel by the third generation, whatever it is, the spiritual issue that Jehovah is protecting against, it's dealt with by the third generation. And again, that verse shows us that it's not talking about the General Assembly, because they wouldn't be married into the General Assembly if they weren't allowed to enter it in the first place. Verse 9 says, when the host goeth forth against thine enemies, then keep thee from every wicked thing. It's an easily overlooked law, but it's basically saying when you go to war, do it fairly. You don't have to go about things unfairly or unjustly, because Jehovah's going to be on your side anyway. So when you go to war, make sure you do it according to the Torah, because by doing it according to the Torah anyway, you're going to make sure that Jehovah is on your side. He's going to be with you if you do that. You're trying to get an unfair advantage or whatever you're trying to manipulate, it's not going to work, because you're not doing it according to the Torah. Verse 10 says, if there be among you any man that is not clean by reason of uncleanness, that chanceth him by night, then shall he go abroad out of the camp. He shall not come within the camp. But it shall be, when evening cometh on, he shall wash himself with water, and when the sun is down, he shall come again into the camp. So basically this is saying, if a guy has a wet dream, then they're unclean until the evening, when they can be mikvahed, and then they can come back into the camp and they're clean again. Verse 12 says, thou shalt have a place also without the camp, whither thou shalt go forth abroad, and thou shalt have a paddle upon thy weapon, and it shall be, when thou wilt ease thyself abroad, thou shalt dig therewith, and shalt turn back and cover that which cometh from thee. Basically it's saying, when you go out to war, bury your poo outside of the camp. And it's hygiene laws like that that meant that the Jews didn't succumb to the Black Death, because they were following things like that, the wisdom of God that was within the Torah. Verse 14 says, for Jehovah thy God walketh in the midst of thy camp to deliver thee, and to give up thine enemies before thee. Therefore shall thy camp be holy, that he see no unclean thing in thee, and turn away from thee. So we can see the spiritual application of this law. It's called to holiness, that Jehovah is with us, and he fights our fights with us when we set ourselves apart, when we're holy, when our camp is clean, when we're clean and pure before him. And it's an important law because it tells us that he will turn away from an unclean habitation. And obviously we are the temple of the Holy Spirit. So if we're unclean, if we've defiled ourselves, because of his own law, he will turn away from us, turn away from the unclean habitation. Verse 15 says, thou shalt not deliver unto his master the servant which is escaped from his master unto thee. He shall dwell with thee, even among you, in the place which he shall choose in one of thy gates, where it liketh him best. Thou shalt not oppress him. So basically, if a slave has escaped from their master, there must be a reason that they want to escape. Don't take them back to their oppressive master. But again, there's a spiritual application to this law as well, because we are freed slaves. We're freed from the bondage of sin. And if somebody is freed from the bondage of sin, then we're to give them refuge. And when it says, thou shalt not oppress them, what it's talking about, the concept that's conveyed in the Hebrew, is it's talking about don't taunt them, or don't kind of make fun of them. So if there's somebody that's at a different place to us spiritually, and they've escaped from sin, we're to take them into the camp and give them refuge, and give them a safe place basically where they can come to know Jehovah's ways. And we're not to look down on the person and say, well, they're not the same place, so we're going to taunt them, or we're going to think ourselves better than them, or we're going to have an air of superiority about us. That's not Jehovah's heart. Verse 17 says, there shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel. So no prostitution. Verse 18, thou shalt not bring the hire of a whore or the price of a dog into the house of Jehovah thy God for any vow, for even both these are abomination unto Jehovah thy God. So it's people like to justify unholy money, and they say, well, I'm going to make a load of money, but I'm going to give it to the church. I'm going to do it in a way that transgresses the Torah, basically. But Jehovah's not interested in our money. He's interested in our obedience. So unless we've earned the money in a way that follows the Torah in the first place, unless we're going to honour his entire legal system, then he's not interested in the money. He's saying it's an abomination to bring it before him as an offering. Verse 19 says, "Thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother, usury of money, usury of victuals, usury of anything that is lent upon usury. Unto a stranger thou mayest lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury, that Jehovah thy God may bless thee in all that thou settest thine hand to in the land whither thou goest to possess it." So Jehovah will bless the people who are in covenant with him. People who aren't in covenant with him, then you don't have to apply this Torah law to. You're free to lend money at interest to these people. They're just normal people, normal business transaction. But Jehovah wants to work through us to the people that are in covenant with him. He wants to bless them. He gives them a special advantage. Verse 21 says, "When thou shalt vow a vow unto Jehovah thy God, thou shalt not slack to pay it, for Jehovah thy God will surely require it of thee, and it will be sin in thee." So when you promise something to Jehovah, make fulfilling that vow your priority. Verse 22 says, "But if thou shalt forbear to vow, it shall be no sin in thee." So it's better to not make a vow in the first place, because then you don't have to pay it back and you're not going to be in sin for not fulfilling your vow. Verse 23 says, "That which is gone out of thy lips thou shalt keep and perform, even a free will offering, according as thou hast vowed unto Jehovah thy God, which thou hast promised with thy mouth." So any vows to Jehovah, outside of the vows that our ancestors made at Sinai, and our reaffirmation of those vows when we turn to Jehovah to follow his law, anything outside of that is not part of the covenant that we have with him. Anything that's extra to that, basically. And making a vow to Jehovah is actually inconsistent with the Shema lifestyle, because what we're doing is we're attempting to manipulate him to do things our way and saying, if you do this, then I'll do that. It's a form of spiritual witchcraft. Now, the pagans partook in this sort of thing all the time. It's not responding to Jehovah's will. And it doesn't go well for people who do it in the scriptures. I'm going to read something from Judges 11, in verse 30. It says, "Jephthah vowed a vow unto Jehovah, and said, If thou shalt deliver without fail the children of Ammon into mine hands, and it shall be that whatsoever cometh forth out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the children of Ammon shall surely be Jehovah's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering." So Jephthah passed over unto the children of Ammon to fight against them, and Jehovah delivered them into his hands. And he smote them from Aroer, even till thou cometh to Minnith, even 20 cities, and unto the plain of the vineyards, with a very great slaughter. Thus the children of Ammon were subdued before the children of Israel. And Jephthah came to Mizpah unto his house, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him, with timbrels and with dances. And she was his only child. Beside her he had neither son nor daughter. And it came to pass when he saw her that he rent his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, thou hast brought me very low, and thou art one of them that trouble me. For I have opened my mouth unto Jehovah, and I cannot go back. So he prescribed his daughter to Jehovah, and he had to fulfill his vow, and he had to kill his daughter because he vowed to do that. So it doesn't, any time the vows are made to Jehovah, it doesn't go well in scripture for the person that's making the vow, because it's basically, it's not saying, well, I want your will to be done. It's saying, from my limited perspective, I would like this to happen. From my limited understanding, my limited kind of human compassion, I would like this to happen. I don't trust in your divine understanding. I don't trust in your divine compassion. So I'm going to manipulate you to do things my way. So do this, and then I'll do that. Not at all the Shema relationship that we're supposed to have with Jehovah. Verse 24 says, when thou comest into thy neighbour's vineyard, then thou mayest eat grapes, thy fill at thine own pleasure, but thou shalt not put any in thy vessel. When thou comest into the standing corn of thy neighbour, then thou mayest pluck the ears with thine hand, but thou shalt not move a sickle unto thy neighbour's standing corn. So basically what this is saying is, you can glean, but you can't harvest. When you go through your neighbour's land, you can take enough to sustain you to eat, but you don't go in with a big sack and start cutting it off and gather it all to yourself. Now this is actually, it tests your neighbour's spirituality as well, because if you're walking through their field and he sees you there picking off the grapes or picking off the grains and eating them, and it's a test of his spirituality and his knowing that ultimately all of those things are Jehovah's, and it says in his Torah that you're allowed to do that. So it's a test of his relationship with Jehovah as well. Now, all of these commandments actually, they're to show us that these possessions, as I was saying before, these possessions are Jehovah's. All of the commandments that were given here in regard to possessions show us that we're to submit to his will about how they're to be distributed. Deuteronomy 24 verse 1 says, when a man hath taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favour in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. And when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. And if the latter husband hate her, and write her a bill of divorcement, and giveth it in her hand, and send her out of his house, or if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, her former husband which sent her away may not take her again to be his wife. After that she is defiled, for that is abomination before Jehovah. And thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which Jehovah thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. So this is the law that prevented Jehovah from remarrying the house of Israel once he divorced them. He sent them away out of his house, and they went and they fought themselves with pagan gods. At that point, he couldn't then take that bride back, so he had to come and die, release the bride from that law, and then that bride could remarry the risen Saviour, as Paul says. Now, one thing that I want to point out here, Yeshua actually clarifies this law. He comes back and says that anyone who divorces his wife, apart from for marital unfaithfulness, he commits adultery. And that's because when it says here, when a man hath taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favour in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her, that's talking about adultery. But the scribes and the Pharisees at the time, they were interpreting this very, very loosely. So basically they could say, well, she spent your dinner, so she's found no favour in your eyes, so you can divorce her. And they were giving people bills of divorcement. And what Yeshua is saying is, you're making someone an adulterer by doing that, because they're not being divorced according to Torah. You're making her an adulteress because she's not been divorced according to Torah. So when she goes and marries another wife, she's actually committing adultery. It might be an ignorant sin, but that's the position that you've put her in by interpreting the law in the way that you have. Verse 5 says, when a man hath taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war, neither shall he be charged with any business, but he shall be free at home 1 year, and shall cheer off his wife which he hath taken. So newlyweds aren't to be disturbed for a year, but to have a year to solidify their relationship. A man isn't to go to war, because to Jehovah it doesn't matter if there's another soldier there, he can give them victory no matter how many there is on the field. To him, his heart is that the newlyweds have this time together without any other disturbance. Verse 6 says, "No man shall take the nether or the upper millstone to pledge, for he taketh a man's life to pledge." So we're only to take a pledge on a loan that isn't necessary for life, basically. If something is absolutely vital to someone's life, you're not to take it from them. Verse 7 says, "If a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die, and thou shalt put evil away from among you." You'd think that this would be an obvious law. You'd think, not selling people, not stealing them to sell would be obvious. But as Paul says in Galatians, the law was added because of transgressions. The possible transgression that this was because of is Joseph's brothers. I'm not sure whether Joseph's brothers did actually sell him into slavery. They intended to sell him to the Ishmaelites, but Midianites are mentioned there, and it doesn't actually say that Joseph's brothers sold him to the Ishmaelites. It mentions these Midianites, which it would seem to have no reason to mention, and then it says that Joseph was sold to the Ishmaelites. So it's quite possible that the Midianites found him, but this law could have been added for their transgression. If they'd sold him, they would have been punishable by death according to this law. It says that thief shall die. So the brothers would have sold him into slavery, they would have kidnapped him, sold him into slavery, and according to this law, they would have been punishable by death. Verse 8 says, "Take heed in the plague of leprosy, that thou observe diligently and do according to all that the priests, the Levites, shall teach you, as I commanded them, so you shall observe to do." So there was a whole load of Torah that covers the way that the Levites were to deal with surat. It's translated as leprosy commonly throughout the Bible, but it's actually a spiritual condition, and it was called surat. And there's a whole bunch of Torah that deals with surat. So it's deal with surat according to the Torah. Verse 9 says, "Remember what Jehovah thy God did unto Miriam by the way, after that you were come forth out of Egypt." What he did to Miriam was he gave her surat because she was gossiping about Moses, basically. Verse 10 says, "When thou dost lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. Thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou dost lend shall bring out the pledge abroad unto thee." So this is another law that must have been added because of transgression. It's basically telling you, don't act like a gangster. If somebody offers you a pledge, don't march into the house and take their pledge. Have some respect and look for them to come out and give it to you. Verse 12 says, "And if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. If in any case thou shalt deliver him the pledge again when the sun goeth down, that he may sleep in his own raiment, and bless thee, and it shall be righteousness unto thee before Jehovah thy God." So if he's got to a state of desperation where he's pledged something that he needs, basically, don't withhold it from him. Give it him back when he needs it, because it's obviously just out of desperation that he's pledged to such a thing. Verse 14 says, "Thou shalt not oppress an hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren or of thy strangers which are in thy land within thy gates. At his day thou shalt give him his hire, neither shall the sun go down upon it, for he is poor and setteth his heart upon it, lest he cry against thee unto Jehovah, and it be sin unto thee." So pay workers expediently. Don't think evilly. I'm okay, so I'm going to make them wait, basically. Consider their poverty in your decisions. Act fairly. Verse 16 says, "The fathers shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for their fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin." So each man is responsible for his own sin. This is expanded a little bit in Ezekiel 18:20. It says, "The soul that sinneth, it shall die. The son shall not bear the iniquity of the father, neither shall the father bear the iniquity of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him." And this tells us that often people interpret what Paul is saying about if you are married, that you then sanctify your spouse to mean that they're saved. But that's in clear contravention of this. It's saying that the righteousness of the righteous will be on them, the wickedness of the wicked will be on them. So it's not to do with who you're married to. What that is actually talking about is having children. It's saying that the children that you have will be clean before Jehovah, not that the actual spouse that you have the children with will be sanctified, will be saved. Sanctified is different to saved. Verse 17 says, "Thou shalt not pervert the judgment of the stranger, nor of the fatherless, nor take a widow's raiment to pledge." Okay, so don't abuse those in need, basically. Don't take advantage of somebody who's in a vulnerable situation. Verse 18 says, "But thou shalt remember that thou wast the bondman in Egypt, and Jehovah thy God redeemed thee thence. Therefore I command thee to do this thing. When thou cuttest down thine harvest in thy field, and hast forgotten a sheaf in thy field, thou shalt not go again to fetch it. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow, that Jehovah thy God may bless thee in all the work of thine hands. When thou beatest thine olive oil, thou shalt not go over the bars again. It shall be for the stranger," olive tree, "it shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. When thou gatherest the grapes of thy vineyard, thou shalt not glean afterward. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow." So just after the harvest has been done, don't go back and get every little bit of it. Leave the bits that are left for the poor people. Verse 22 says the same again. "And thou shalt remember that thou wast the bondman in the land of Egypt. Therefore I command thee to do this thing." Deuteronomy 25 verse 1 says, "If there be a controversy between men, and they come unto judgment, that the judges may judge them, then they shall justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. And it shall be, if the wicked man be worthy to be beaten, that the judge shall cause him to lie down and to be beaten before his face, according to his fault, by a certain number. 40 stripes he may give him, and not exceed, lest if he should exceed and beat him above these with many stripes, then thy brother should seem vile unto thee." So 40 stripes is the maximum that can be given. And this was actually one of the things that was, a fence was built around, and the sages would say that only 39 stripes can be given in case they go over the 40, in case they transgress the Torah. But to make that law, apart from the fact that it's adding to the Torah, it's second guessing Jehovah. If Jehovah, who's got foreknowledge of everything that's going to happen, knows the end from the beginning, then he will have put in place safeguards anyway. So if he says 40, it's 40. They're not to say, "Oh, I think that really we should change it to 39 just in case you've got it wrong there." Jehovah says 40, it's 40. Verse 4 is the one that we were talking about before. "Thou shalt not muzzle the ox when he treadeth out the corn." Now, Paul talks about this verse in 1 Timothy 5:17 to 18. He says, "Let the elders that rule well be counted worthy of double honour, especially those that labour in the word and doctrine. For the scripture saith, Thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treadeth out the corn, and the labourer is worthy of his reward." So we see here that we're to apply these verses. We're to apply the principle behind them. We're not just to legalistically apply that rule and say, "Well, I've done that, but in any other situation that's kind of similar, I don't have to do it because it's not in the Torah." That's not how we're supposed to act. We're supposed to see Jehovah's heart. Verse 5 says, "If brethren dwell together, and one of them die and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger, her husband's brother shall go in unto her, and take her to him to wife, and perform the duty of an husband's brother unto her. And it shall be that the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel." And this is the law that the Sadducees came to Yeshua about, and they were saying, "Well, if someone's brother dies, and then he takes that woman to wife, and then he dies before they've had children, and then his brother takes her to wife, and so on and so forth until 7 people. And whose wife is she in the resurrection? And they were trying to catch him out, and he said, we will not be married nor given in marriage in the resurrection. That's the law that he's talking about. He says, and if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate unto the elders and say, my husband's brother refuseth to raise up unto his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak unto him. And if he stand to it and say, I like not to take her, then shall his brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders, and loose his shoe from off his foot, and spit in his face, and shall answer and say, so shall it be done unto that man that will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him that hath his shoes loosed. So, the brother has got free will. You can either choose to follow the Torah, or you can choose to not follow the Torah. But if he chooses to exercise his free will and not marry his brother's wife, then he'll be shamed in front of the entire community. Taking off the shoes. The shoes were seen as a status symbol. Like, men would wear shoes, the children wouldn't wear shoes. So, in their culture, the way that it would be seen if the shoe was taken off would be that he was being embarrassed, that he was being embarrassed in front of the elders. They were being shamed in front of them. Verse 11 says, when men strive together one with another, and the wife of one draweth near to deliver her husband out of the hand of him that smiteth him, and putteth forth her hand and take him by the secrets, and thou shalt cut off her hand, and I shall not pity her. Perhaps the most bizarre law in all of the Torah, basically saying, if your husband's having a fight with somebody, don't go up and grab his testicles. And if a woman goes up and grabs someone's testicles while the guys are having a fight, then you should cut off her hand, and I shall not pity her. Again, the law is not enforced. This is a deterrent. Basically, the principle that I can see behind this anyway is that if the husbands are involved in a fight and the wife isn't to go up and because she's weaker, go for his weak point and grab his testicles, possibly stopping him from having kids in the future. Don't do that. Don't get involved in the argument in the first place. But as I say, possibly the most bizarre law in all of the Torah. I can't think of another one that's weirder than that. But we've all been warned that that's not acceptable practice. Verse 13 says, thou shalt not have in thy bag diverse weights, a great and a small. Thou shalt not have in thine house diverse measures, a great and a small. But thou shalt have a perfect and just weight, a perfect and just measure shalt thou have, that thy days may be lengthened in the land which Jehovah thy God giveth thee. Okay, so the way that their culture worked, if you went into a merchant and say you were buying 5 pounds of potatoes, the merchant would put the 5 pound weight on the scale, and you go up with potatoes until they're balanced, and then you'd have 5 pounds of potatoes, and you buy them and go away. If the merchant was dishonest, what he'd do is he'd use a weight that was a bit light, put that there, and put something to stop the scale from tipping as well. Yeah. In a Torah observant society, it doesn't make any sense anyway, because if we trust in Jehovah and we trust that He will perfectly apportion things exactly where they should be, then it makes no sense to try and dishonestly put ourselves ahead of anyone else. It's like saying, well, actually I think that you're wrong in apportioning things there, I'm going to do it unfairly and I'm going to put myself ahead. And it's also showing that you don't have faith in Jehovah anyway, because if you really believed in Jehovah, then you'd know that He was going to equal the injustice anyway. But a spiritual application of this law is that we're not to judge one person one way, say our mate. We're not to judge our mate by one standard and our enemy by another. We're not to say, well, that's acceptable because Charlie's done it, so I'll let him off. But if my enemy was to do it, then I think it more harshly of them. I condemn them for doing it. And behaviours as well that we have within us. We're not to do something ourselves and then condemn someone else for doing exactly the same thing. We're to have one weight and one measure, and that's to be the Torah. We're to judge everything by that. Yeshua actually talks about this law in Matthew 7:2 when he says, "For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged, and with what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you again." So again, he's talking about having this honest judgment. And if you think something is bad, then don't do it yourself. Like when it says to not take the speck out of your brother's eye if there's a log in your own. Basically saying, don't be hypocritical. Verse 16 says, "For all that do such things and that do unrighteously are an abomination unto Jehovah thy God." So Jehovah doesn't take kindly to cheats and to liars. Anyone that sets themselves up as Lord over his creation, basically, we're told to judge righteously. If we are to judge, and our standard should be his standard, this Torah. Now, the last few verses of the portion are quite interesting. It says, "Remember what Amalek did unto thee by the way, when you come out of Egypt, how he met thee by the way, and smote the hindmost of thee, even all that were feeble behind thee, when thou wast faint and weary, and you feared not God. Therefore it shall be, when Jehovah thy God hath given thee rest from all thine enemies round about in the land, which Jehovah thy God giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it, that thou shalt blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven, thou shalt not forget it." So these are the Amalekites. This was the first battle that the Israelites had with anyone. There was the one where Moses held up his hands, and when Moses was holding up his hands, the Israelites were winning, and when they dropped, the Israelites started to lose. But we've got to look at a way to make that law apply today. What's the spiritual significance of that law? The scribe in Israel will literally interpret this law, and when he's testing his quill, he'll write out the name Amalek, and he'll strike it out and scrape it off the parchment. But I don't think that that's what Jehovah had in mind. There's a literal interpretation of the law. But in order to understand this law, we've got to understand who Amalek is. Amalek was the grandson of Esau. Okay. Now Esau, in what the Jewish sages would say that Esau represents, is kind of this westernized Greek way of thinking. A non-Hebraic Christianity, they would say that's Esau. Because Esau sold his inheritance for the materialistic. And they would say that Esau is a close relative of ours. We can live in close proximity. We can coexist peacefully, because Esau doesn't seek for Jacob's descendants' death, but they are much more of this world. They would sacrifice the spiritual things of the Word of God for the more material things of this world. So the commandments of God, they would not follow them because they didn't like the material consequences of following them, basically. The Amalek comes from Christianity, but it's Christianity gone berserk, basically. What Amalek represents in our society today is the little horn power in Daniel, is the Antichrist power, and as we've seen on the Monday night, this is Rome, this is the papacy. It's the king who exalts himself above God, and we don't have any choice but to make war with this king because, as Daniel says, he makes war with the saints. So when it's telling us not to have peace with Amalek, not to kind of let our guard down, it's talking about because Amalek is our sworn enemy, and he doesn't fear God. It says in Deuteronomy 25:18, he feared not God. Just as the papacy has no fear of God, comes from this kind of Christian stream of thought where it has no fear of God, it exalts itself above God, takes God's place on this earth. And peace with Amalek just isn't an option. It's not an option that Amalek would give us, and it's not an option that Jehovah gives us. We are destined in the end to butt heads with Amalek, to butt heads with the papacy. They've said that the only group of people on the planet that they won't accept or that they disagree with are the fundamentalist Christians. The Pope is the head of the World Council of Churches, and that's all of the world religions. They said we don't have a problem with anyone, basically, apart from fundamentalist Christians. They're our enemy. And this is apparently one of the biggest Christian institutions on earth. But we don't have the choice. The papacy will bring things to a head, bring things to the point where we have to make war with them, where we have to kind of, a line is drawn in the sand, and we say, well, we're going to stand on the word of God. We're going to be those fundamentalist Christians that you've got a problem with. And the whole world is going to hate fundamentalist Christians. It's going to be painted as a form of bigotry, a form of hate. And we're not going to have a choice, basically. We're going to be enemy number one. And this all comes from the papacy, because the papacy is the head of all this, gathering all of the world religions together, basically to single out and attack the fundamentalist Christians. So that's who Amalek is in our society. Amalek just wants Jacob's descendants dead. That's their entire goal. They just want to wipe out the descendants of Jacob from the planet. So it doesn't matter how much we desire to have peace. We all want to sit around the campfire and sing Kumbaya. We can have peace with the other nations. God says that that's fine. But with Amalek, we're never to lower our guard, we're never to seek peace with them. We're always to have in the back of our mind that they want to destroy us. Amen.